Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show, as always, and welcome to anyone that might be brand new to Maverick Mind. You joined us on such a great week. Today, we're talking about something that I've wanted to dive into for the longest time, and something that is kind of a thread through my own work as well, but maybe in a different way. This week, we are talking the intersection between creativity and sexuality, or creative energy and sexual energy. And I'm joined by the very beautiful Rimsha Warda. She is a sex and relationship coach. A lot of her work is kind of underpinned by tantric philosophy, as is mine, maybe in a different way. But that's kind of what we're speaking about today. Rimsha is originally from Pakistan, but she also spent a lot of her life living in the US. She's now a bit of a world citizen, let's say. But I really wanted to bring you this conversation with somebody like Rimsha, who's a real expert on sexual energy, because understanding this relationship that is taught through tantric philosophy, and by the way, I'm just going to preface that by saying when I'm speaking about tantric philosophy, I'm not only talking about sex. Tantra is not only about sex, it's a whole life science. And obviously, sexuality is part of that, because the reason why sexuality is part of that is because within Tantra, we are taught that creativity, sexuality, and vitality are all the same energy. Our life force, our prana, you might want to call it. But our life force energy is what creates. Our life source energy is our sexual energy as well. And understanding the interplay between those things and understanding a lot more about tantric philosophy that goes beyond sex, but we're talking about sex today, so let's keep with that. But understanding that interplay was the biggest game changer for me, for my creativity, for recovering from creative burnout, from going from hustling my little butt to the ground in my last business to creating a business that actually doesn't require me to hustle all the time, creating a business that is more of a magnet to the life I want rather than me having to hustle and grind everywhere, because hustling and grinding just depletes that vitality. It depletes your creative force. Whereas when you learn how to use it and utilize it and kind of lift it and energize yourself, your creativity, your creative energy, your sexual energy, your vitality flows so much more freely, and you'll create more authentic work. You'll feel a lot more authentic in the way that you express, and there's a lot of practices within it that we can use to guide you toward balance within your life and within your business as well. So that is why I was so passionate about having someone as incredible as Rimsha on the podcast. So let's dive in, shall we? Let's stop rambling on. Rimsha Warda, a massive warm welcome to Maverick Mind. Rimsha, a massive welcome to Maverick Mind, the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here and so excited to dive into this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to meet you and merge our worlds together and see what comes through in this space.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to kind of give the audience a bit of an idea of who you are, where you came from, and what led you to do the magical work that you do now. Maybe paint a little bit of a picture of where you're from. I know you're from Pakistan originally, right?
Yes, I was born and raised in Pakistan, and then I immigrated to United States at the age of 14, and I'm actually currently on an ancestral journey. And this is a huge part of my work as a sex, love, and relationship coach. Even though I support couples and in those containers, what I truly believe is that the feminine leadership is needed more now than ever, not only just in relationships, but in this world. So ancestral journey kind of started from that place of like, wow, in order for us to actually step into leaders and creators on this planet, we have to drop into our DNA. We have to drop deeper and descend deeper and deeper into the body. Where does a child is created? Where is an idea of a business is created? Where is forms of art created? It's inside of a woman's womb, the energetic womb, right? So in that journey of being a creator and being now a filmmaker and an author and all these things that I've been so blessed to do, now the journey is for me to go deeper and deeper and deeper and layer of that artistry inside of me through my healed ancestors, so that when I am serving and creating, it's from a place of this healed state, from this mysticism state, these ancient codes that exist in our DNA. And so that's what I'm currently doing in my work and in my life. So I'm currently in Pakistan after literally not being back in 16 years. So it's a huge deal for me.
Wow, that's a big journey back to source, I guess, for you, I suppose. Um, Tell me a little bit about that, your childhood or like your early years living in Pakistan. What was your family life like? Was creativity or even kind of being a bit more open in different areas of your life accepted within your family or not so much?
Wow, yeah, that's a loaded question. But I can certainly kind of, yeah, I can bring back around to, yeah, being born in this part of the world it was very harsh. It was extremely, and it's still to this day, honestly, like me landing here 2 days ago, I could not believe it's still the same. It's still just as extremely oppressive for women. And, I came from a lower class too, so it was even worse. You really have barely any access to education, let alone creativity. But for me, being in a highly traumatic state and in a, very abusive household, and there was a lot of bombings and violence outside my own house. The way creativity played in my life was actually being at home alone and being in the darkness, like literal darkness, because we didn't have electricity, and laying on top of the roof and looking at the clouds. Like, my favorite thing to do was seeing things beyond what they looked. And I found that through clouds, I would just look at clouds and create things, right? The concept of dragons and fairies wasn't there in that time and space in my world. So I would just see them and experience them. And I started to actually unlock my psychic gifts through kind of like that trauma, but also like, creativity was the only way. Like, how can I close my eyes and see things that are not there so that I can find hope? Right? It's like for
Mm.
some people, creativity is literally survival, right? So creating scenarios in my head in order for me to just get out of my body almost and see things that can give me this anchor to hold on to. Now I've become significantly more embodied in my creativity. It's more grounding and it's more real and tangible. But back then, creativity was really just a way of survival, and it was not something that was celebrated. Even dancing and music was so oppressed in Islamic community, and this is kind of what I'm stepping back into. It's like, how can I use art as a way to tell stories, as a way to show a different lens of femininity and feminine essence from that place? Because for me, it was literally just survival. I was, like I mentioned, in an abusive household, and no electricity, just pure darkness and lower class. And honestly, I think back, it's like, how is my reality now the way it is? And I go back to that child, that 10, 11-year-old child who was so lost in the mystics of this really ancient land. So for those who don't know, Pakistan is one of the oldest civilizations on this planet. We have Mesopotamian and roots, as well as Indian roots. So it's very ancient, very, very powerful. If you enter this land, you're seeing the light and the dark weaving together in front of you. It's very, very real. Witchcraft is real. Magic is here. It's very real. You'll see mystics and Sufis all around you. So being from that part was like, I could get lost in it in order for me to survive. And that carried on till when I got to United States. So that was kind of my upbringing.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I can totally not resonate, but I can see that when you're in that real survival mode and things do feel quite dark around you, to kind of go into another world or kind of see things not as they are is a real creative kind of superpower, the thing that we have. I think it's the birth of
Yeah.
so much visionary change when we can kind of see things not for what they are, but what for what they could be. Whether that's you see a
Yeah.
design in a cloud or you see a piece of art or you listen to some music just from the noise of the road outside. I think that that is something that um, can really create amazing art out of like from darkness comes light, right? Or you
And I
can
mean,
have
that's
both.
how we become visionaries, right? we allow ourselves to open to another portal of possibility.
Yeah.
And so many of us don't know what to do with the seeds that are planted within us from the higher guides. We don't know how to birth it into this reality, even if it's offerings, courses, book, whatever it is, pieces of art. And it's the ability to not only receive that, but to literally ground it through our body. I think that's where really everything changed for me for the past few years. How am I just not just viewing things and creating new realities from my this third eye perspective, but literally birthing it, which is what women are created to do.
Exactly. Yeah. So kind of go into a little bit of your journey when you arrived in the US, because obviously you must have felt like you were on another planet or something.
Yeah, very extreme. I landed in New York City, so in Manhattan, and then got to New Jersey, and it was like, I'm telling you, I saw green color for the first time in my life. I'm seeing these. I remember my old like camera, and just all I took was the photos of random trees because I saw everything with so much joy and excitement. And my first snow, oh my God. My first snow to this day, like I have this felt sense experience of it still alive in my body. It was so wonderful. And Christmas was so wonderful. Halloween was scary as shit.
Yeah.
It was super scary. But it was really like I loved that I could walk around and feel safe. And it's so interesting. Like now, looking 10 years later, I actually landed in one of the most dangerous places in New Jersey, and it was still 10 folds better. So after later on, I found out like I actually need to be careful walking around, but I was like really exercising my freedom. And I could have a loud mouth. I was a very quiet child, and moving to
Yeah.
New Jersey meant, oh my gosh, I could speak and have a perspective and not get punished for it.
Yeah.
So it was just beautiful. And I will add one last thing. I also saw the illusion. The illusion was also very real, where I was able to see through the veil of, oh, the states, what I thought and believed was freedom is not real. Because no matter, like, of course, Pakistan is the kind of country it is, but even in the states, people are still slaved to something. They're still caged. They're still living in prison for the most part, including people in Wall Street and all these established places with so much wealth and beauty. I was like, wow, I could feel in my body this, like, how much people were caged from their own true expression, but also trying to like make you buy into it. Like, no, 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 no. Who you are is not real. So like come into the prisons. That was another, the whole 9 to 5, go to university, go live a certain way. Like that whole thing was, yeah, I kind of saw right through that when I first moved here, first moved to the States.
Wow. Yeah, that's so true. But it must have been really evident, I guess, like when you're not brought up in with the same mentality, maybe, or you're not brought up in the same way to then kind of see it almost afresh and without a lot of influence or a lot of expectation around it. You can kind of really see it. So that's amazing that you could see it kind of right off the bat, especially being that young too.
You know what? I saw it, but I still wanted to buy into it. I wanted
Oh
to
yeah,
go
of
right into that
course.
same cage. I wanted to fit in so badly, especially post 9/11 and the racism and all of that. It's like, okay, how can I fit in more and more into this prison? So at least I have, especially United States have this illusion of power or the rest of the world, where everybody, wants to be like American people. They still listen to American music the most, and we watch American movies. And of course, now that I'm in Pakistan, I'm seeing that where people even pretend to be American when they're not. They've disconnected themselves from their own culture because, like, we have this, we sell this illusion through Hollywood, like we know what we're doing, and like this is what success looks like, this is what beauty looks like, this is what creativity looks like. So I noticed that, and I wanted to like walk right into it, like consciously, because it's like, how do I survive as a mystic, as an artist in this world from an ancestral lens, when in a spiritual, deeply spiritual lens, when nobody sees it, nobody values it? Where's the money in that? That was another thing. Where's the money in that? How will I survive?
Yeah, I think so many people will resonate with that because, of course, being an artist or of any kind, we're kind of taught that that's not a route that you take to get rich. or is very, very small percentage get really rich and everyone else is just kind of starving. It's actually not the reality. It's a kind of an image that we're given, but actually now it's not really the reality. And you can kind of cultivate the bravery to choose what you're passionate about rather than just taking on everyone else's opinions about what we should or shouldn't be doing or how we should not be living.
Yeah, 100%. I think actually the space that you're creating is just another nudge for people to see like you can more than survive in this. Like you're gonna thrive with it, with what
Yeah.
you're doing. Yeah, so I celebrate this space as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So what kind of brought you in towards like obviously moving to the US and then after a certain amount of time, what kind of made you feel drawn towards working with sex and relationships the most?
Yeah, so like I told you, I was walking right into the prison consciously. Um, and particularly because there was no ground underneath me. It was like, this is the only way to make money and survive on my own and have freedom, especially away from my parents, have some level of freedom. And I was an aerospace engineer for a while and I worked on submarines and it was like a whole different life that I lived, whole different life. And I was still deeply spiritual, but it was something that I had to hide. And then I became a U.S. Marine Corps officer. So I served in the military. And, so there was all these like peak experiences that I had of like how can I fit in here? I was still fighting to fit in to the point where I wore a uniform, in one of the most elite forces in the world, and it was extremely, extremely challenging. Like I don't want to ever underplay the Marines in the United States because it really is highly, highly challenging work field. And what happened was that I started to have a somatic experiences in the Marines because I'm like 4'10", 90 pounds, the smallest Marine they've ever had. And I'm like hiking with 110-pound gear. And if you've tasted somatic work, then your body starts to almost like purge things that no longer serve you. And in order for me to survive through some of the physical challenges in the Corps, I had to go into places that were dark. I was like feeding off of the darkness to give me strength, only for me to start remembering my sexual trauma and like how much pain was in my body. And I realized I had this like aha moment. Oh, you can't run away from what you've gone through. The only way is by digesting it. The only way through is by digesting the pain. And I started to unconsciously digest the pain through those physical activities and then somatic practices that I started to teach myself. And then as I started to remember my sexual trauma, I had to like go into places that I was told I would go to hell for, right? So sexuality for us was like, it's only for men and it's only after marriage, right? Just like and in most religions and most societies. And I was for the first time in my life having to not give my body to another man, but like actually visit those places. So I bought my first crystal dildo and I didn't know how to Google these things. I didn't know where to find it. And I was still in the Marines, and so I didn't have any resources as far as like education in that realm. So I started to create tools to meet myself. And I will say the place where it started to really change was when I started to explore my cervix. And the cervix is for any woman out there with business or creation or even a mother, whatever role that you play in this lifetime, the deepest part of you can experience is through your cervix. And it's so, so powerful. And of course, for the first 2 years of exploring the cervix, I had nothing but pain. And something in my body was like continue to go and continue to go. And even the first time I saw my cervix, I wanted to puke. I had like this, I couldn't even stand looking at a pussy, And so I had to like really go through the unshame, take away the shame from my body to explore this part of my body. And I realized, even though I came from a highly oppressed society, even women around me who were American and Europeans and men, same thing. Same thing. We all carry this wound. And so I started to have these remembrance and these beautiful visions. And I will say, I started to feel powerful. I started to feel magnetic. I started to walk differently. I started to talk differently. And my wisdom started to have this depth that was beyond what I thought was possible for me to access. And I was accessing ancestral wisdom through my DNA, through my pussy, through my vaginal canal without even consciously, looking for it. I didn't know it was possible for me to go into those places. And then I discovered my womb and started to really see what is here. Why are we, systematically around the world telling women don't go into those places? We have this obsession with ascension, right? Even Buddhism and every religion, but even Buddhism, that's like closest to the pure religion. We are obsessed with leaving our body. We're obsessed with opening up our third eye and accessing everything that's outside of us. Even so, that we sell like past lives regression and things like that, which is beautiful, but there's a reason why you chose to come through the lineage that you did, to come back into this brown body or white body or what black body. What is here? What is here, and how can we co-create with it? And I started to just birth workshops, and I started with writing and music. It was music, like light language was coming, and just things were happening that I was like, I didn't learn this. So this is why women, being a woman, is so powerful, that we get to be born in this, because through my sexuality, through my self intimacy, I started to just be in creation, and then I could start to change my life and start to change the way I attract men in my life, right? And collaborators. When I started to get into business world, it was like, I don't want to do this alone. I want powerful women around me to show me how it's done. And it was like, all of a sudden, all of these women around me, I'm like, you guys exist out there. Someone like you who's doing this and have done it and have really walked like different timelines. So even though I'm new in the entrepreneurship world, it's like boom, boom, boom. You can start creating realities around you through your sexuality, and businesses and art and films and music and children, whatever.
Yeah, for sure. There's so much to like dive into there. And I think that the root of everything is a lot of that we don't realize until you start doing something like this, how much having shame actually impacts your body, your health in general. And I mean, by shame, I mean this sexual shame that a lot of us carry through whatever culture you've come from. As you say, I think I've spent a lot of time in India. I've never been to Pakistan, but I think in India, the shame is a little bit more in your face. They talk about it a bit more, whereas I think in Western society, it's a little bit it's more of an undercurrent. I mean, I was in a yoga philosophy class once in Mysore in South India. And the teacher, he's an incredible teacher. I'm not going to put shame on him. He's a really great teacher. But he told us that we should only have sex on a full moon, only after you're married. Only after you're married. And there was a sort of collective look at each other from everyone in the room. Like, so we're collectively not going to listen to that, right? Okay. It was quite funny, but it was just like, you really do that? All right. But I think that when you start to realize how much sexual shame actually impacts your creativity and also your sense of self-worth and your sense of self-empowerment, everything shifts. I mean, another experience I had was I started doing some like pelvic body scan type things. And it was something that I found for pelvic pain related to endometriosis. And just from doing those, I started to realize how my intuition got really, really strong. Like intuition about other people, my intuition's always been very strong, but this was like supernatural kind of stuff, it was crazy. And yeah, I think it's a really strong journey to take yourself on.
Yeah, I think it's the deepest, darkest journey that we can go on. And it really is profound. And I love that even this simple exercise of body meditation that you were doing, it was enough to like sharpening your intuition.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I will add that, around sexuality, like that teacher who was essentially preaching that, like don't have sex unless blah, 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 after marriage. What is the most taboo subject on this planet? It's sex.
Yeah, it was sex or money
And yeah,
or
and
religion.
when yeah. And I would say sexuality, even I think the most, it's like the people's darkest secrets are not around actually money or even religion. That's not their darkest secrets. It's always about their kinkiness, their fantasies. Even if they're in love with someone, it takes them like that's like almost the last thing they want to talk about, unless you've really gone through a lot of journey to be able to say the deepest, darkest desires that you have. So how does that impact your creation and how you walk in this world if you can't own this thing that happens when you go to bed at night, when lights are off and you're by yourself in bed, or when you're sitting by yourself and on a vehicle, or where do most people thoughts go to? I feel, and I've, after studying sexuality for this long, and especially specifically talking to actually both men and women, like it's like the thing that's, if there's two thoughts, between each thought they're thinking about sex
Yeah.
and pleasure. So this is something that's so shadowy. How does that relate to our birthing process as business women and as healers and creators, right? If we can shine light to those places, this is why masculine leadership in this world doesn't work. They too are oppressed, so they let out their sexuality through rape and prostitution and all these things when no one's looking, right? Some of the most powerful men on this planet are the ickiest men on this planet as well. They have these like private islands with prostitutes and children. It's really dark, right? So men too have been oppressed in sexually, so they behave in that way. So anything that stays in the shadow will always behave in a way that's, for the lack of a better word, fucked up ways. So for women specifically, on my personal level, and also the women that are in my world who are business women, come into my space to be sexually empowered, is that when they own it and meet it and see it, something starts to integrate that allows the birthing process of new consciousness, new offerings, new businesses, even more effortless. And again, they start to walk differently, talk differently, and they start to own these aspects rather than shaming themselves, right? Shame is such a huge pain body that I would say no matter what society you come from, have, and it directly relates to leadership because that's what artists do. They create an impact, they create ripples through whatever they create. So I really believe like owning your sexuality and exploring it without any lens of religion or culture or family or whatever, and you really allow yourself to explore. Forget even with a partner, you're doing it just with yourself out of curiosity of who am I when no one's looking. How can I love this part of me and meet it fully? It changes in the way we start to co-create with the universe.
Yeah, just for people listening that maybe haven't explored this stuff so much before, can you maybe, it's something that I come back to a lot, but maybe I'd love to hear it from your voice. Can you explain a little bit about the intersection between creative energy and sexual energy and how they relate to each other or how they are the same?
They are the exact same thing. I mean, in a very basic way, sex allows the creation to happen, right? It's a emergence of masculine seed and a woman's soil. So when you're working with sexual energy in Taoist traditions and also in Tantra, right? So both Taoism is more about working with the sexual energy as a sacred thing to harness. That's why they talk about like you're not focusing on orgasmic as much as like working with the energy and digesting the energy and being with the energy and allowing it to flow more and more, which allows both bodies, male and women, to have longer orgasms. And then in Tantra, it is how can any point of your being be the entryway, the gateway to source. So when we think source and a flow of energy, both allows creation to unfold. So this is how I personally have taken those two traditions in my own work. And the way I've applied it is to be sovereign with my sexual energy and use it for creation. And the creation can be this synergy right here too, right? We're creating something here. This is an energy that's flowing in and out between both of us, and also the consciousness of this podcast and the message that it has. And so the focus where I am saying like clearing your sexual energy and knowing your sexual energy more will allow you to create and serve in your business from a place of fullness and wholeness, and you can really serve the source, this thing that is bigger than all of us, from that place. And also getting to know your sexual energy, because we don't understand our energy systems. We don't. Most of us don't. We're not taught it, and it's quite tricky because you're working with subtle energies, right? Orgasms are felt. You can feel orgasms. But to feel like a sexual energy, it's so subtle. It's just an energy. It doesn't have to have pleasure. It can just be a subtle energy that's flowing and, through your entire being. That takes practice. And so devoting to that, I mean, you start to become so magnetic that you don't have to manifest or pray for anything. What serves the highest good for you and for all will start to happen on its own. And the creation process would not have to be intentional. It will simply happen because you're devoting yourself to mastering your energy system and witnessing it for what it is without being attached to the pain or the pleasure. I hope that answers the question. I get a little poetic.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's also really important to kind of take a little bit of what in yogic philosophy we call brahmacharya. Some people mistranslate that as celibacy, which actually is not what it means. It means kind of appropriate use of your sexual energy, like not just giving it to anyone, not just putting it anywhere, but actually being really intentional about where your energy goes, where energy flows, intention goes, or intention goes and energy flows, or whatever it means. And yeah, I think when my exploration of like the intersection between creative energy and sexual energy and how those things are the same, and how to use both kind of to their best advantage, and like really using them in a really intentional way, and that in that way kind of makes you and your work and the work you create a lot more magnetic to the things that you want, is by being really intentional about things. I mean, it's from a creative sense, I'll speak to that sense. It's, channeling your creative energy into something that's not just haphazard. You're not just putting, for a very basic example, you're not putting an Instagram post out there just for the sake of it. You're being really intentional about who you're speaking to, why you're putting it out there.
Yes.
What's the vision beyond that? Where is it going? And that is kind of using enough of your creative or sexual energy in a way that's not going to kind of leave you feeling depleted, because I think it can kind of make us feel that way if you're just kind of haphazardly scattering your energy around. It can lead to burnout, and then when you're burnt out, you lose your sexual fire and you lose your creative fire, right?
Yes. Such a great, yeah. This is why the maintenance of sexual energy and being mindful, especially, I don't know if you talked about human design in this space.
I've had a couple of people on here that have talked about human design. Yeah.
Yeah, so like I'm not going to dive into it because it's not my expertise. But say, for example, for me as a projector, I have to be I have to be so careful with who we are co-creating with. For example, even I met a gentleman from here who's a very well-known actor, and we're sitting together. He's a manifesting generator, I'm a projector, and I could feel like there's a sexual energy which felt so platonic, which felt so like in a co-creative space. It was unbelievable. And he was like planting seeds within me, in my consciousness, in my soil, that felt so fertile. It was really, really cool because I could feel he's a very conscious man. So it felt like there was this like flow of sexual energy and creation without it feeling like I am being penetrated with something that's not useful for me, or it feels like, okay, this feels conscious, like it's meant to serve our community, local community here, so this is a great example of sexual energy. And also, like, for example, the consciousness of this podcast, like, how can I exchange this sexual energy with this podcast? What does it want here? How can I plant seeds into it? Right? You can play that masculine role too. So it's so versatile. Like, even as women, you have the ability to have seeds through your sexual energy, especially when we're working together as women. Like, I feel like as a projector, I'm like the seed giver. Like we're the golden poopers, right? We've got the visions and the ideas.
Love
And
that.
then
I'm going to take that.
and it's always, and you bring it in front of a manifesting generator and they're like, "Oh, this is how it's going to go." They're like, run with it. They become the fertile soil in which it starts to grow. So this is, it's, I love sexual energy. It's so playful and it's so versatile, and it's not as simple as, just a man and a woman and being fucked and this, and like, it truly is such a playful energy if you just allow yourself to focus on the lower, or like the first three chakras, and really engage with it and connect it to your heart, and then connect it to your third eye and your crown. Like, if this channel can be active, it's so powerful. But in most societies, we only focus on the last three, right? Like up here, like, let's just leave our body. This is
Yeah,
not safe
exactly.
here.
Yeah, I've said it a lot. I can't remember on this podcast, but in other channels that I've worked through, that I think we often believe that our brain is, or our body is just this thing that kind of carries our heads around like a taxi or something. We're just
Yeah.
like this taxi for carrying a brain around to meetings or something. But actually, so much of your creative energy comes through the channels of your body. It comes through the nervous system, you can call it. You can call it the chakra system. You can call it the meridians, whatever school of thought you follow. And by the way, they're all basically the same. It comes through the body. So we have to really drop down into this very grounded space and like kind of then work our way up. I'd love to know, kind of shifting gears a little bit, just because I think a lot of people listening are the kind of people forging their own path. They're kind of going against the grain. They feel maybe a little bit like a black sheep, or a bit like they're an alien living in this world, kind of forging a path that maybe others haven't really seen much of yet. I'd love to know, like, as you kind of shifted from the military to starting your own business, were there any barriers, either within yourself or external from your family or friends or anyone, that made you question that journey? Or was it always just follow the intuitive pull and this is what I'm here to do?
No, no, no. It was very painful. It was very challenging. It's meant to be challenging, right? Your dharma is meant to be challenging. If it was easy, we would be living our lives of our purpose easily. It's meant to rip you in pieces. And I lost my mother, my father, my 5 siblings. I lost my entire community in Pakistan. I lost everyone. So I don't actually have blood family, and I don't want to glamorize that. And I also like don't want to say that this is a path for everyone, but for me, the challenge was so vast that I was shunned from my entire community. There's a reason why it took me like more than a decade to come back to my motherland, because my name is just, there's just so much dirt that was put on it, because I started to actively heal in public's eye and actively show my ugly pieces. And then also being in the military, that is so much of like you're caged in this box of masculinity that God forbid you're a feminine being. It's so painful, and part of my sexual reclamation work that I do is about menstrual sovereignty. How can we align to our cycles? And for me, this was a very, very, without going too deep into it, it has been extremely challenging journey, and it still to this day is. However, as long as I stay connected to my body through my cycles, which actually is funny, while we were asking the question, I had a thought, like, I think this needed to be said here, that you can create even from your pain. You can create even from your grief. Grief is like, I'm quite young, so I'm only 29. So there's, grief is like, I don't consider myself like a healed woman. I consider myself an artist. So even though my grief body is like very much alive, I create with it. And I create with it as an empowering way. So if grief is this child inside of me that has been abandoned by some people, how can her and I co-create together that can serve other children out there, other children, this grief children that are sitting inside of these women, grown men and women's bodies. So you don't have to wait until like you're good and you're ovulating and you're juicy to be in creation. So how can you be in the death cycle, right? Women are mostly in their death cycle. We bleed. We are in our luteal cycle for more than half of the entire cycle, right? Ovulation, the follicular window is very tiny because women are meant to be productive for a very short amount of time. and then we go back into our autumn, inner winter. So this is, and this is my challenge to everybody in your community. Like, can you stay in that? Can you be and honor the death within you? Because that's the place we are meant to be. We are here to die. This very much Kalima energy of like destruct, and allow that destruction to happen inside of you, and see if you can create art with that. See if you can create offerings with that. It doesn't have to stop you from making money or be successful and have a business. Create with what is being offered here. And that's why when I talk about exploring your vaginal canal, cervix, your womb, I'm not saying you're going to be orgasmic and having a greatest time of your life. No, it's about meeting what is there and how can you co-create with it in this very moment. That's the true self-intimacy. So no, it's been a very, very, very challenging journey for me to this day. But I will continue on because this is bigger than myself.
Yeah, well, that would be really inspiring for people to listen to, because I think something that so many of us struggle with, and for most of us, not even that bad. It's more like we think people are judging us more than they actually are paying attention. But for you, it's like a lot bigger than that, and like it's really inspiring to see you keep you still standing in your own truth and you owning the truth within your voice and following your path, how that kind of meanders and shifts and changes. That's really inspiring. So I'd love to know the next kind of iterations for your path exploring filmmaking as well.
And before I go, I just want to note, like, I am the happiest I've ever been in my entire life.
So, well, yeah, that's the thing also. Yes. When you start following, really living your truth, even if it's really hard, you can't go back. It would just, the idea of going back just feels like shrinking.
No, for sure. You can't go back. It's like once you've taken the pill and you've seen your potential, you continue on. So as I talk about grief, I also talk about the fact that I'm actually real darn happy with my life. And I have a lot of support and resources, and I am in many ways thriving. So the film project is part of the birthing process. It was 3 weeks ago. I was in Bali, and I was like sitting there, like making more excuses. I've been making excuses to come back to my motherland forever. It's like, oh, but I have to do this. Oh, this had to happen in my business first before I could. Oh, this, always some excuses. And my friend, who I co-wrote a book with, Dare to Ignite Your Dreams, and it's a series of immigrants and their stories. As I was talking to him, he really called me out on it. It's like, okay, who is this inside of you that's really like keeping you away from? Like, this doesn't sound like you. I was going on and on about excuses about like, oh, I like Bali, I want to stay here, and Hawaii is nice, and Thailand is nice. It's like staying close to Pakistan but not entering. I was really, really terrified. And that's when, as he gave me the invitation to drop deeper into myself, and I started to see like there is an 8-year-old inside of me who is fucking terrified because of what she's gone through. She is terrified to enter in this very land where she went through so much abuse, and so I met her. I fully met her and met her grief. And it was, I had so much compassion for that child as she started to come through me. It's like, oh my gosh, no, it makes sense why it's taken you a decade. It makes sense why you've been holding me back, and then I had to like talk to her like, I'm an adult. I will take care of you. I will take care of you in ways your father couldn't and your mother couldn't. And I made a promise. I made an oath to her, and I felt my body like just turn into this mush of surrender and safety of like, okay, I trust. Let's go. Let's go make this happen. And as I did that night, I had this like seed planted, and I saw a documentary, and it was very clear. Now, I've never had interest in that. I never thought it would be possible. I have been, my stories have been out in other documentaries, but it just was not something I was ever capable of, because why would I? I don't know. I don't even know step one. What do you even do? And the idea dropped in that you have empowered so many Western women, but we're not free until all of us are free. And the heart chakra of this world lies in the Middle East, and they are the most oppressed. They are the most oppressed societies. What are we seeing in Iran and Iraq, and of course in Pakistan, and specifically also in India? India is highly, highly oppressed. It's extremely dark land. As powerful as it is, it's my ancestral land. I understand it very, very well. We have a lot in common. So I saw that idea that There are so many documentaries that has been made about Middle East, but it's all about the hurt and the pain and the lack of rights and all of this. How can I create a story that is empowering? How can I create something that can give them the cheat codes to liberate themselves despite the lack of economical and political support? So this is why I came on this land to do this documentary. Now, I don't know how it's going to unfold, but that's the seed that's been planted, right? The issue for women to be liberated on this land is because there's no political, economical support for them. But I will prove otherwise, because sexual energy is something we all have access to, correct? We all have. The soul is always here. The body is always here. And if I can show that through your pain, through walking through the shadows, you can liberate yourself without needing all the Western technology and tools and having money. Like, money is a great thing, but do we absolutely need this to free ourselves? Hell no. So this is what the documentary idea kind of dropped in, and all of a sudden now I have filmmakers, directors. It's like this whole world has opened up to me that I had no idea, And it started with the seed, and I'm a projector. So those of you who are projectors, you just once the seed has been planted, you commit to it, and then the path opens up. And I'm not doing much. I planted the seed, and I have people reaching out. Other people are doing the work for me to connect to the scholars and filmmakers and lights person and this person, and it's such an I am like it feels so over my head to do this project, to be honest with you right now, Hallie. I'm like, how the fuck am I going to make this happen? But I'm also speaking to like December 2025 version of Rimsha, who's going to be like, oh my gosh, it's real. It's here. I have birthed this. So this is also an invitation for all of you who have big dreams and daring dreams to like, I'm going to change the world. Do it. However way that is, just do it.
Yeah.
Just start, plant the seed.
Yeah, it's always overwhelming at the beginning. And often we trick ourselves into believing to start something, you have to know how to do it. Nobody knows what they're doing. People changing the world, people doing big things, they don't know what they're doing. They don't know the whole picture. They don't know every step of the way. They just know they have a vision and it's going to come. You just trust that it's going to all come together. You'll meet the right people. You'll get it all sorted. And day by day, piece by piece, it starts to come together. And then, as you say, December 2025, you'll be like, wow, that was actually not that hard.
Like, wow, it's real. Has been materialized, which is how 2024 has been for so many of us. Like, oh my gosh, how did we do? We had all these manifestation ideas, but we are capable of so much more than actually what we can imagine.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of it. Like, it can be so beautiful. So I'm trusting that it will happen and on its own timing, as long as I continue to stay committed to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that. Great. Well, as we kind of slowly come to the end, there's a couple of questions I've just about started asking almost every guest that I've had on. And I'd love to ask them to you. The first one being, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
There's like a dog competition, like what kind Tibetan dogs? This woman who had like this, she does competition with Tibetan dogs in Colorado on a tiny farm. Crazy lady, highly, highly adventurous, very, very old at this point, and she gave me the most simplest advice. She said, if you're seeing two paths ahead of you, always take the most adventurous one.
I love that.
And I remember that one still to this day.
I love that. That's such a good one. And the next question is, I asked this one because I think a lot of the time we're on any kind of path, creative path, you're forging your own life, you're kind of creating a life that most people would never dream of. We feel often a little bit misunderstood. And that is why this question has become really interesting to me. And that is, what is the most common misconception you think people have, either about what you do or who you are, or both?
Oh my gosh, so many misconceptions, especially in my own community. That I may be a sex addict, or that like I'm a prostitute. I've gotten that, which is like, no. Teach sexual sovereignty. I think, or that I am polyamorous.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah. that I just love fucking, that's what they believe. That I have this obsession with sex. No, I love being a creator, using my sexuality as this sovereign thing that's mine, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Love that.
And
I think that's a great,
Lilith is my inspiration for that.
love that. I think that's a
Yeah.
great kind of message to leave people with, like create something with this energy that's yours and only yours. And that means that whatever you create is only ever going to be one of that. And that is worth chasing for sure.
Yeah. For sure, for sure, for sure.
Amazing, Rimsha. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been such a pleasure to chat with you. And I'll, of course, leave the links to find you in the show notes, but just in case people are ready to have an appropriate amount of stalking already, where's the best place people can find you?
Yeah, you can find me everywhere. I would say Instagram and YouTube is where I'm most active. And it's just my name, Rimsha Warda. So wherever you go, you will find me there. Yeah.
Okay, amazing. I'll leave the links below, everyone. And thanks again
Thank
so
you.
much for coming on the show. And thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Maverick Mind. I hope that you've loved it, and if you have, I would appreciate it so much if you would subscribe and write a 5-star review on wherever you're listening to this podcast from. If you'd like to keep the conversation going, I invite you to join me over on Instagram at maverickmindco or on my website maverickmind.elliefoden.com. And I'll see you in another podcast very soon.